So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Shivesh Puri, and these are my colleagues.
I'm Julian Henderson.
And I'm Maggie Graham.
We're here today to talk to you about the findings of our research that we conducted over a 6-week period in Himachal Pradesh, India. The title of our project, as you see, is the Assessment of the Education Employment Gap in Himachal Pradesh, India. Now I'm going to hand it off to Ms. Maggie Graham.
And I'll start by giving you a brief overview of our community partner. Uh-oh. There we go. Sorry about that. The name of our community partner is Arpana Trust, and we really could not have asked for a better organization to work for. They were so hospitable and just such a pleasure to work with through the entirety of the project. Arpana is located in Karnal, which is a city in the state of Haryana. That's about 2 hours north of Delhi. Arpana has several other locations they operate services out of. One in Delhi, and that's mainly serving the Mollarbund slums outside of Delhi. And then, of course, the station in Haryana. And then also operate several services in Himachal Pradesh. And this is where we were. And this region is very rural, very mountainous, all in the foothills of the Himalayas. And we worked in several villages there. We were centered in Gajnoi, which is a very small town, and from there we both hiked and drove to surrounding villages to conduct interviews and to do our research. I'll tell you a little bit more about the missions and services of Arpana. Their primary service is probably the medical atmosphere. Yes, they have a hospital in Karnal and also another in Dalhousie. The hospital in Karnal has 135 beds, and with only 22 doctors, some of which are paid, others which are volunteer, they serve over 30,000 patients annually. There are several outreach camps that they have from week to week that come from this hospital and go out into the rural surrounding regions to help people there that can't make it to the hospital. Another large service of Arpana is their women's empowerment programs. They facilitate self-help groups through microcredit lending in villages in Haryana, in Himachal, and in the Delhi region. They have had a lot of success recently with these and are really increasing their work in that area right now. They also have programs with women's handicrafts to promote the work of the women and sell their things they make in Delhi and in other regions. Another big service of Arpana is educational programs. They have a lot of tutoring services in the Mollarbund slums. This is outside of Delhi. And the project that we were working on was looking to expand their education services into Himachal and to provide more things there. And also in Himachal Pradesh, agriculture is the main source of income for the majority of people in this region. And Arpana does a lot of work with farmers there to improve their yields by teaching them new techniques for irrigation, for growing vegetables, and also for marketing their produce. And again, Arpana is just a wonderful organization, and we are continuing our relationship with them, and it was a pleasure to work with them. And now I'll hand it off to Julian.
And I'm going to talk a bit about our process through the project. When we were still in Charlottesville, we still had a lot of discussion to do with Arpana, so we had to just bounce a lot of ideas off of them and see what was really a viable project. They talked to us about what their needs were and what resources they had available. And we also had to consider the resources we would need for projects, and how viable that would be traveling from the United States to India. Upon arrival in Gajnoi, we had to continue the discussion with Arpana and fully delineate what our expectations were from ourselves, what we expect to contribute, and what we expect to get out of the project, as well as what our community partner was hoping to get from our experience with them. We also organized a preliminary schedule just to try to keep ourselves on track. We familiarized ourselves with the projects that were already going on through Arpana, and also talked to our colleagues and got a little more acclimated to the new culture. So through discussion with Arpana, our goal became to assess the viability of opening a boarding school located in rural Chamba district that would serve rural, underprivileged youths aged 15 to 25 with the goal of providing language, mathematics, entrepreneurial and technology skills that would help them to compete with their peers in urban centers. So the participant groups we targeted were students, and this includes students in private schools, public schools, including elementary, middle, and high schools, and also government vocational training schools. We also talked to teachers in all these different schools. We talked to employers both in the region locally and in the nearby industrial city of Badi, which employed a lot of men and women from the Chamba area. And we also talked to other development practitioners working in the area of education in the area and got their feedback and their experiences to help with our project. For data gathering, we used surveys and activities with the students. We also used focus groups and interviews to try to bring out all the points that we were hoping to get out of our meetings. One of the most important parts of our process was that we remained very reflective throughout the time. We understood that coming from UVA, we did not have that much experience in development or even in education. So every day we came together with our community partner and discussed how the day went in terms of activities that worked, activities that didn't, information that we got that we didn't need, or information that we didn't need that we needed to have next time. So all of this discussion was helping us to continue this self-evaluative critique of our program and our methods, and it helps us become a lot more efficient, productive as we went through our project. And clearly, flexibility was very key with this. We couldn't stick too much to one idea, hold us down. Now I'm going to pass it over to Shivesh.
Thanks, Julian. So what Julian was talking about with our process, we basically interviewed and talked to a bunch of groups across the community. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our primary findings, which we essentially identified as a perception gap between industry leaders and villagers. So when talking to villagers, we were able to confirm that there was a lack of employment and training opportunities. This was due to things like financial constraints because of socioeconomic status, physical barriers because they were in a really rough terrain, very mountainous and hilly, and not well-developed transportation infrastructure, or just the physical lack of these kinds of institutions and facilities. So we noted that. Further, we were able to confirm that there was a motivation to take advantage of training facilities and aspirations to find better employment opportunities. Moreover, we noted a definite and significant desire for supplemental training facilities and programs and a willingness to enroll in these kinds of things among these village communities. So on the other side, on the industry side, through our discussions with industry leaders, we found that these industry leaders had a very negative perception of villagers' attitudes towards employment. They would use words like lazy, attachment to family, poor work ethic, things like that. So they thought that these villagers really weren't prepared for the kinds of work that would be expected of them in these industrial areas. Also, interestingly, we found that industry leaders were very receptive to the idea of an ARPANA training facility and thought that there was a definite need for that within these communities. They also expressed their willingness to contribute to these kinds of training facilities in a sort of corporate social responsibility kind of capacity. So we boiled this down to basically a perception gap, that on one hand you have industry leaders who don't necessarily see these villagers as hardworking or desirous of opportunities, while on the other hand we confirmed that these villagers are actually motivated, they have employment aspirations. So we boiled this down as sort of an exposure issue, that these cultures and communities aren't exposed to each other that much, and that's where this disconnect kind of arises. So some secondary findings we found. We talked to a lot of leaders of training facilities within the Chamba district, and we found that they don't necessarily do that much for the communities that they're trying to serve. They basically churn out certification. I run out of time, so I'll wrap. They basically churn out certification and don't necessarily lead to further employment opportunities. In fact, most people that go through these training facilities actually end up becoming employed by the training facilities themselves. So again, not really an expansion of opportunities in that regard. There were, however, elements of these programs that demonstrated merit and replication. These programs, by adopting a particular curriculum, get certification from the government to operate. So this would be very important for an ARPANA facility to replicate for legitimation purposes within the region. Other issues we came up against were gender, families unwilling to send their young women out of their villages for opportunities, economic mobility versus community fragmentation, that is, sending labor outside of the community as opposed to keeping it within the community for local development, MNREGA programs, which are the National Employment Guarantee Act, which guarantees villagers 100 days of paid work which sort of disincentivizes looking for other opportunities. And finally, local infrastructure and ARPANA capacity. ARPANA is a great organization, and their heart's in the right place, but they lack the resources to do a lot of what they want. If we could just take a little bit more time to talk about our philosophical takeaways. A big part of that is clarifying our role through discussion that Julian was talking about with our community partner.
And secondly, the importance of a diverse community engagement was really important to us. We found that after all our work, if we really had focused more on just students or primary education, that it really would not have shown us as much as it really did by the end.
And it was important that we remain flexible, and we'll stop. Questions?
Any questions?